The season of love, February. So to commemorate this day of love, I dove into films like really hot subgenre of romantic comedies. And they're usually overlooked because it's typically just seen as work that you do to make everybody look pretty and as hot as possible, and it's not really, there's not a lot going on artistically behind the scenes. But I don't actually see that. I think rom-coms can be a very interesting subgenre when viewed through the appropriate lens. Now, obviously, I'm not the target demographic for most rom-coms, but I feel like if you're doing a rom-com effectively, anybody should be able to watch it. But we have a couple of ground rules for what actually is a rom-com. So under the umbrella of chick flicks, there are a couple of different categories, one of which is romantic comedies, but the other one is dude revenge movies, like girls gang up to get revenge on a boyfriend. The Other Woman is a perfect example of that. Then there's holiday movies, which is Hallmarky, where the romance is kind of there, but the whole center of the story is focused around a particular holiday. The rom-com category is where the romance is the centerpiece of the story, and it is discovered and explored in a comedic way. So is a romantic comedy a chick flick? Yes. Is a chick flick a romantic comedy? No. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So here's 5 romantic comedies that you didn't know were actually good movies. Number 5, music and lyrics. Now we're starting off strong with Hugh Grant, who's the king of rom-com movies. Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore are a writing duo that are trying to come up with the song for this pop star girl who's a very jaded reflection of Christina Aguilera during her weird Indian phase. You remember that? Are you old enough to remember that? But I think this movie does a really great job of exploring the creative process and how creating things can be really daunting as well as difficult if you've gone through some sort of hurt relating to your creative activities. The exploration of that creativity is really interesting. The performances are really great in this, and it satirizes the music industry pretty accurately, actually. The way that people think, the way that people talk, the yes man culture, it's pretty accurate. I will say this movie does kind of suffer in the cinematography of it all. The camera does do some interesting things, especially with movement, but I feel like everything is framed in that stereotypical medium close-up that all rom-coms have, where it's just from the belly button up. But there are some clever uses of the camera and a couple shots that really stuck out from this film, but not very many. Most of the conflict is played in wides, but that's kind of par for the course of the genre, right? You're not watching a rom-com to process a bunch of trauma and have a giant catharsis or whatever. You're just kind of wanting a good time, and this is certainly that. It's the dialogue is really quippy and really fun. Hugh Grant is charming, Drew Barrymore is ditzy. Their really quick dialogue back and forth is really fun, and it's a great watch. Number 4, Bridget Jones' Diary. Honestly, really love this movie. It's kind of a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, based on what the characters do and how they are and where they go and stuff like that. The performances are really great. Renee Zellweger is from Houston, and she puts on a British accent that's really, really clean. The lighting and the cinematography is actually really mature and grounded in reality. Nobody looks too polished. Nobody looks overly, perfect. The cinematography never crosses over into let's make everybody look hot land, which I really appreciate, especially when they're outside at night. It can feel grounded and even gritty at times, which is kind of cool to see in a story that's so much about love and direction. It is definitely not a movie you want to watch with your parents. The dialogue is a little too realistic for my taste, but I see the value in it, and at the time when it came out, it was such a groundbreaking piece of media that people had never seen lives of women being portrayed in this way. Now, I'm not going to include this next movie, it's just an honorable mention, but because it's a piece that was made after a piece of pre-existing media, I just kind of didn't want to include it. I wanted to focus on primarily original screenplays, but Pride and Prejudice is the best looking romantic comedy you've ever seen. Some of the shots in this movie are unbelievably well done. The lighting, the cinematography, the performances, and it also falls into that weird subcategory of period piece. I kind of don't count that as a romantic comedy, but then again, it's anything will be a period piece at some point. Period piece romances are kind of somewhere down here. Little Women is not a rom-com. It's a period piece romantic. Pride and Prejudice is kind of in that same spot, but it is the best looking romantic comedy, if you want to put it in that category, ever. That one shot where Darcy's walking across the field, that lasts literally 23 seconds. It's amazing. It's an amazing shot. Before we get on with the rest of the list, please romance yourself way down to the subscribe button and click that, because we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Number 3 on this list is honestly like the first real American romantic comedy that I feel like wasn't in the tradition of British theater, wasn't in the tradition of vaudeville, and it is the masterpiece that is Annie Hall. Now, honestly, Annie Hall is a hilarious movie, and it broke a lot of conventions for the time, including fourth wall breaks, text on screen that wasn't related to what people were talking about. It was confusing at times, and it was really just kind of interesting. Diane Keaton gives a career best performance here. Woody Allen is obviously a figure that's maligned in a lot of like history and stuff like that, but at this period of time, he was making some of the most interesting films in the world. This thing is shot like dynamite. It is so good. It is so clean, and it's shot by the guy who shot The Godfather, the Prince of Darkness, Gordon Willis. I feel like we kind of underestimate like how difficult it is to shoot in low exposure nowadays, because we have digital sensors, we can bring it back. Sure, there might be a little bit of noise, but you can run that through a program. You couldn't do that with film. It was like, if it didn't expose, it wasn't there. You know what I mean? So the fact that he could control the shadows in the ways that he did and create pockets of light throughout the frame, amazing stuff. If you've watched a lot of romantic comedies, but you haven't seen Annie Hall, you might kind of feel like it's a little bit of familiar territory, right? It's some of the things maybe you've seen in different pieces of media already. But the thing is that Annie Hall was one of the first to do it. Pieces of media that break trends and create new categories and go in new, interesting directions deserve to be studied. And if you haven't watched Annie Hall, it's an amazing watch. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of heartbreaking at times. And it's a very, very well-made movie. Number 2 is You've Got Mail. It's 90s, it's comfy, it's fall outside, it's got the internet, sort of. That's all you need, man. That is a great movie. Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, they were kind of like the 90s like romantic comedy couple. I almost put in Sleepless in Seattle, but honestly, I just think You've Got Mail is a much better made film. You've Got Mail kind of speaks to the lost art of the medium budget film. You have very well-known actors giving grounded, realistic performances and being funny in a unique setting. And that's really all you need to make a really good film. Fun fact, this movie actually started popularizing online dating and started to destigmatize the whole idea of like, I met my romantic partner on a computer. Like, that used to be a big deal, and now it's like kind of normal. It's like, what? You met them in real life? Crazy. And in this movie, what's really fun about the romance is it comes out of a central issue that is presented to the audience, right? They have a cantankerous relationship in real life, but then they have a smooth relationship on the internet. And I think this was one of the first movies to really like tackle that idea that you could have duality of relationships between people that are in the real world and people that are not in the real world. So I think that's kind of cool. It explores some new territory. It's kind of diving into the nature of human relationships, what makes them human relationships, and it's presented in a really digestible, really fun kind of atmosphere, and it's never taking it too seriously. I feel like most movies that come out that try to explore that relationship have a very fatalistic view of humanity. You know, it's like, oh, it's going to be terrible, it's all going to hell, you know, like, it's really negative. This movie has an optimism about relationships and about the internet that you just don't see in a lot of movies nowadays because it's so much different. I kind of miss some of that optimism, honestly. And the number 1 movie, 50 First Dates. I know. But I literally can't find a problem with this movie. There's so much humor packed into the unpacking of this romance that it fulfills all the criteria that I need. It's shot pretty decently, like, it's a rom-com. It's definitely not breaking any new barriers. And sure, there's some dumb side characters, but the ultimate mechanical core of a romantic comedy is to use the mechanism of comedy to explore the romance. I can't think of another movie that does this as well as 50 First Dates. It's Sandler, it's Barrymore. To me, it's the epitome. It is the pinnacle. It is exactly the epitome of mid-2000s romantic comedy filmmaking. You know, you have a movie with Samwise, it's gonna get to the top, dude. You know, I can't say no. I think there's also this interesting thing in 50 First Dates where it talks about like the nature of relationships, the nature of commitment, doing something over and over and over again, even if it means you do that for the rest of your life. Like, I can definitely see a parallel between waking up and having to figure out a woman every day. Are you waking up with that idea of like, I'm gonna go discover my romantic partner again today? Or is it you're waking up and you start to feel the same thing over and over again? This movie tackles that concept in a really interesting way because this guy is afraid of commitment, but he's having to commit, and he's afraid of doing the same thing for the rest of his life, and he's literally doing the same thing for the rest of his life. But it's his attitude and it's his perspective that changes so that he actually sees it as a good thing. That's actually really powerful storytelling. I can't believe I have a Sandler movie on this list and not a McConaughey movie. That's the most surprising thing about this exercise. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days is also one of my favorites. It's really fun, but it's not as good as some of these other ones at being a romantic comedy. So anyway, hope you liked the video. Hit subscribe if you want more jazz, and I'll see you in the next video.